there are rules and there are things that we follow, but when someone who's higher up than you can change those rules at any time, like a magician, I can snap my fingers and you can't buy that stock anymore. That's not fair. See,
Yeah.
that's not cool.
Insane.
It's not a fair game, right? It's broken. And I think that's what Dumb Money does so well. It just shows how systemically, like, this is a broken system. This money doesn't exist. Like, you have, like, how does somebody lose $1 billion a day?
Yeah.
You know, they lose $1 billion a day. And it's like, oh, I guess I got to get bought by somebody else now. It's like this, it's like Monopoly money.
Hello and welcome to the MUBI podcast at TIFF. My name is Shahbaz, and joining me to review Dumb Money are some dumb dumbs, Daniel and Anthony. Anthony wanted me to introduce you guys as Wall Street bros, but man, you guys are some dumb monies that I've ever seen. Some real dumb ones, you know?
Dang. Okay, man. Okay.
Was that too much?
All right. That's enough.
I don't mind the dumb money part because at the end we have the money. If I'm dumb but I have money, I'm happy. Right?
It's true.
That's how I look at it.
That's life, man. You're dumb, but you got money. We're fine.
Look at the glass,
surviving.
All full. You know, I love that. I love that outlook,
100%.
Anthony. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for changing it around. We're at TIFF. We're celebrating TIFF. We're watching a lot of movies. We already have some reviews popping out, some reviews popping in. Who knows? There's just there's a lot of stuff happening here. We're in the festival of our hometown. We love TIFF. We love coming here to celebrate. This year, obviously looking a little different with all these different strikes happening. But of course, we want to make sure we get these reviews out and talk about these amazing, amazing films that are coming out, especially in our hometown. And today we are talking about Dumb Money, directed by Craig Gillespie. And this movie is about the GameStop Wall Street scandal that was occurring just literally a few years ago in the pandemic. Not even that far away.
It feels like it just happened. Like, it feels like it was just like a couple of weeks ago.
I remember
we were going through this.
I remember when they sold the rights to this story, and it was within literally the same year it happened.
So
like
quick.
by the end
of
2021 or 2020, it was like, this is going to be a movie. And we even spoke about it. I think in one of our episodes, we spoke about how fast Hollywood was moving on this, and here it is.
Gone are the days of where, you know, a situation would occur and then it would be years after you'd get like a biopic or whatever.
And I remember we were talking about like Dope Sick, and we were talking about what's the other one with Amanda Seyfried? Dropout, where it's like these are things that happened in like the mid 2010s, and we're like, oh wow, it's already a miniseries, it's already a movie, and like here we are with something that literally is still happening.
Like it's still hot.
Yeah, it's still hot. It's not like it's still happening. It's like still going on right now. So it's just crazy that we're here.
Curious for you two, did you invest at all in GameStop when all this was kind of going down?
Well, do you want some tips, Shahbaz?
I do. Do you have any?
No, none.
I remember looking into it, and I'm always worried about putting my money into like the stock market because it is a casino essentially.
It's like a gamble.
You either win or you lose. And you know, I kept thinking about GameStop, and I didn't put money in. I know people who had put money in. And it was just this crazy revolutionary event that was happening in front of us, and like you just couldn't keep your eyes off it and wonder how does this end? Where does it go? And we're gonna talk about it in a couple of minutes, but man, what a crazy time to be an investor or to even just maybe start investing money.
Yeah, Dan, what about yourself?
I did not invest, no, but it was something that we were all following because again, it was 2021. What else was there to do other than follow the madness of, you know, just another thing happening in the world? But absolutely crazy to think that, like, of all companies, I know AMC was another big one that people were just pumping money into these corporations that traditionally always had, or as of late had, like really poor performing stocks, and to see them go crazy and do their thing, it felt like a meme, right? Like that was a big thing. It's like, oh, the stock is a meme now. And the fact that, you know, this Reddit community, this community of people investing, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars into GameStop. I always want to call it EB Games because that's what we grew up with here in Canada. But to invest it into that company, or like that company that wants to give me like $5 for like my gold N64 Ocarina of Time cartridge, like I don't think so. No, it's wild to think that it's one of those stories. Again, as it was happening, we were saying this is going to be a movie one day because it's so crazy. It has to be true. And of course, who better to bring a story like that to life than Craig Gillespie?
Yes, Craig Gillespie, who you will know from directing such films as Cruella, I, Tonya, and of course the series Pam and Tommy.
And Mike. Mike was another big one from him too.
Mike was another big one from him. This is also such an interesting cast because it's literally all big hitters. It really reminds you of when The Big Short was coming out, a movie that I personally was not too fond of, but this movie, I'm excited to talk about it. But in this movie, we've got Paul Dano, Pete Davidson, Vincent D'Onofrio, America Ferrera, Nick Offerman, Anthony Ramos, Sebastian Stan, Shailene Woodley, Seth Rogen, and Dane DeHaan. Like I feel like I'm probably missing a few more people, but man, this movie is stacked and there's a lot to definitely discuss into this film. So before I get to that, I want to just say thank you for following us. Of course, we are available on all social media platforms out there as well. You can join our Discord. We will be opening up a TIFF chat. So if you happen to be come to Toronto and you're from not Toronto and you want to talk to us or see us, hey, message in that chat. And if we're downtown and we meet up, Anthony will personally give you a hug. I think that was Anthony's promise of 2023 was to give as many people a hug as he possibly could.
Hug everybody.
Right now, it's still zero. So it's still zero.
not even us. We haven't even gotten a hug.
No.
Maybe for my birthday. Who knows? But Daniel, please give us your first reaction for Dumb Money.
Man, what a wild concept of a movie. You're kind of just thrown into it right away, and I it's hard not to compare Paul Dano's character in this movie to him as the Riddler in the Batman, because he's like this, guy going and doing these weird streams about, stocks and all of that. But it really gives you what I love most about Dumb Money is that it paints the most vivid picture of what December 2020 to like January 2021 looked like, where you'd have people with masks on, maybe half masks. They're like little sayings like, "Oh, can we? We're doing masks. We're not doing masks." Like it's just like it's such a vivid moment of time that it almost makes me, makes it hard to go back to that sometimes. Because you're like, oh man, like that's how we used to live every single day. And I know it's not a criticism of the movie at all. This is something that I've spoken about with The Morning Show, which is the Apple TV Plus show, where it's like, man, like we're hitting on these themes so soon after they just happened that you're getting into it. Like, man, like weird deja vu where it feels like so close to what just happened. But I had such a great time with Dumb Money. I think there's such great performances in this movie. I think Craig Gillespie did a great job directing it. It's not as, I'd say, electric for me as his other films, where you look at I, Tonya, or even Cruella, that feels like those movies were like a shot of adrenaline, especially Pam and Tommy, and moments of Mike, where you have people, talking right to the camera and like doing the most outlandish things and presenting it in a bit more of a comedic way. And it's funny, Shay, you mentioned The Big Short, and this is one that we were talking about after we watched it, where this feels like Craig Gillespie going a little bit more Adam McKay than, the more traditional kind of outlandish stuff that we've seen, Craig do before. And that's not bad. It's just, this feels a little bit more safer of a movie for him. And I think because it is so recent and because it deals with so much stocks and these terms and all this stuff, there's a lot of moments where it did feel like The Big Short for me, where you're having celebrities explaining, well, what does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? And I always go back to that scene in The Wolf of Wall Street where Leo starts to explain like, yeah, it doesn't matter. The point is we were getting rich. And I kind of missed a little bit of that energy from Dumb Money because I never felt that it was a super energetic film. It was a little bit more somber because it spent a lot of time introducing the lives of all of these people who really need the money and are being held down by either the work that they're in or their bosses or the companies that they work for, or these asshole hedge fund people who, have the cards stacked in their favor, who will always get a bailout, who will always, no matter how much money they're losing, there'll always be a parachute for them at the end of the day. And as an audience member, you hate them. You hate because they're the villains. And there's a point where Pete Davidson calls them like, these guys are really like Disney villains. And it's true, they are. And this is something that's, probably worse in the real world, right? Like, again, we're just seeing the film version of it. Seth Rogen, Nick Offerman are like the big kind of players here, and Vincent D'Onofrio. I wish we got a little bit more of them to really feel their presence, because anytime we kind of cut back to their story or we'd be gone away from them for a little while, I felt like we were missing the presence of what the other side was fighting against. They kind of just said like, oh, we're going to have a meeting, and you kind of left them, and then you would go back to the heart of the story, which is Paul Dano, Shailene Woodley, as was it Roaring Kitty? Was his screen name?
Roaring Kitty,
which was just fascinating, right? Like just one person who is literally showing their stock sheets to the world of like, this is what I'm buying, this is what I'm investigating. You know, I like the stock, and people kind of going along with this journey. And like, I don't think I've ever seen something like this happen in the real world. Again, if there's an example you guys could give me, or those watching or listening, where people would just follow blindly to this person and hold and put their money in there and not sell. Like it's absolutely amazing.
The
It
Bible.
really is.
Oh, sorry, too soon.
The Bible. Too soon. Well, a couple thousand years, but it's wild to see that like this is a thing that happened, that just happened. You could go to the Wikipedia article about it, or turn on the news probably, and still hear remnants of this happening. It's a story that's so crazy that it has to be true. And I had such a great time watching it. And I think it is the performances of everyone involved. It really is an ensemble cast. Yes, not everyone gets their moment to shine, but I think Paul Dano, Pete Davidson, Shailene Woodley, like that kind of trio of that story really what sold the movie for me. And it's a great time. I really had a great time with it at the festival.
Yeah, I think, to touch on some of the points that you brought up there, Daniel, about this film being very Adam McKay. This really is just Craig, I think, trying to be a bit more mature. I think he's kind of like settled back in his seat a bit and been like, okay, I can do what you've seen before.
No talking penises this time.
No talking penises. I can have someone stare at the camera, and I'm kind of glad in a way he didn't do that. Not because of any other reason, like I don't like that anymore, but I kind of wanted this story to be a little bit more just straightforward. And for me, I think that really worked. I understand also what you mean by not seeing Seth Rogen and Nick Offerman so much. And I felt that was so intentional to the fact that, yeah, these assholes, like it didn't matter. Like they didn't care.
Right.
Whenever you'd cut back to them, they were just kind of like, oh, it's whatever. It's not a big deal. We're betting against Wall Street. Good luck with that. And I found all that stuff so interesting. And for me in this movie, the most amazing performance and best character, I think, really is Pete Davidson. Man, he is so good in this movie. He's so funny. He's such a lovable asshole in this movie. And Pete Davidson gets a lot of shit for a lot of different reasons, but man, it works for this movie. He's really great.
Never for his acting, I hope.
Never for his acting, I hope.
He's actually great in everything that he's in.
I like Pete Davidson. I have no issues with him at all. He's so good in this movie. His balance with Paul Dano, I think, is great. I wish we got more of Vincent D'Onofrio, because I think whenever he's on screen, he's such a brilliant guy to have on there. But it's interesting that you're kind of getting, it almost feels like this would have probably been a lot better as like a mini series, a couple of different episodes that Craig is, so good at, because you have all these different stories, all these different characters, and they're kind of intersecting at a certain point in this film. That's what worked really well in it. It was fun. It was light. It kept it breezy. And I think, maybe there might not have been that much stuff happening, so maybe you didn't have that much of a story to tell. But I do think, though, this would have worked really well as like a 6-episode, maybe even less, miniseries that would have premiered on like Hulu or something, because Craig is great for that. But
it would have, like, each episode would have, I think, like focused on a different person affected by obviously this. And hey, at the end of the day, Shay, like there most likely is going to be a series about.
I think there
this
is,
because
though. I think there is.
I think because I think there was the rights to the movies that were sold, and I think there was a show that was being developed. And obviously, at the end of the day, I think if anyone in this film was going to talk to their penis, it would have been Pete Davidson. So maybe they'll save that for the series.
I hope. I mean,
there is. I guess there is like a sequence of being naked. So that is a naked sequence. That does happen in the.
It does happen.
It's true.
But yeah, I'm going to kick it over to Anthony here in a second. But yeah, I really had a good time with it. I really was engaged. And I was afraid a little bit. I know, Daniel, you brought it up too, where you have these movies that are so recent and we're trying to, I don't want to say forget about the pandemic that we were just in or are in, however you want to look at it. But when you look at a movie like this, it was kind of scary kind of looking back at it, because I've been avoiding movies that have been taking place in the pandemic because I don't want to relive it right now. But when I was watching this, it was that weird kind of like, oh my God, we just went through this. But I didn't feel annoyed by it. I think they handled it in a way where it felt like, okay, we know you guys have seen this. We know you guys have been through this. And it poked fun at some of the moments that I think from the pandemic that we really were like, yeah, that was a big deal. That was a big deal. But yeah, great performances all around. Anthony, please let us know your first reactions for Dumb Money.
Yeah, the pandemic portion of this movie was it never felt like it was in your face. It was just, this is what's happening. We have to have some sort of, because it's a historical accuracy type of thing, right? And it says a lot about where our mindset was during that time period, because we had nothing to do. And then when you go on Reddit and you see people talking about, oh, I just invested in this, and you got to hold, and the diamond thing, and you just keep holding, and it became like this revolutionary thing that happened with a bunch of people, and it was more of a fuck you than actually making money. And yeah, like it's so funny that the idea of the stock market, and they say this in the movie, it is designed to, get your treasure of sorts. Like, you put money into it, and if you have the luck, you might get something out of it. And here these people they're investing their money legally. They're doing everything possibly like legal. There's nothing happening other than, hey, I think we should all invest into this one stock. And here's these hedge fund managers who, this is their board game, and you're trespassing on their board game, and they're like, no, this is our game. You cannot tell us how we can do things in our game. And the rules that they start to manipulate them, and it's so bullshit. It's like, well, that's not fair, because all the shit that you guys do behind the scenes, that for the billions and trillions of dollars that go into the stock market, we don't know, and we don't see. We only know of like the insider trading or the Ponzi schemes. But for these guys, all these little people investing this money to maybe make some money to get like shitted on, it just says a lot about corporate America. It says a lot about where our world is, and how the rich will always be rich and the poor will always be poor. And that's the thing I loved about this film. It's just, I was so angry at these people. I'm like, oh, I want to like set a stock market on fire, like I want to go into the Dow and burn it down. Like it was
bring it down,
anarchy, right?
You want to break the bell. You want to crack the stock bell that they're
Bane and the Dark Knight Rises.
Because you see the heartache that these people are going through, and they take the risk that, a lot of people will say, well, that's their choice. And of course it is, but it's also, there are rules and there are things that we follow. But when someone who's higher up than you can change those rules at any time, like a magician, I can snap my fingers and you can't buy that stock anymore. That's not fair. See, that's not cool.
Insane.
It's not a fair game, right? It's broken. And I think that's what Dumb Money does so well. It just shows how systemically, like, this is a broken system. This money doesn't exist. Like, you have, like, how does somebody lose $1 billion a day? Yeah. They lose $1 billion a day. And it's like, oh, I guess I got to get bought by somebody else now. It's like this. It's like monopoly money. It doesn't. It's not real.
And the idea of the bailout, and how other, like, the friends of these hedge fund people would bail out the other hedge fund investors. And I even feel for the hedge fund, because hedge fund investors are not just people who have invested billions into this hedge fund, but it's also mom and pops and people who have saved their money to invest in further. Yeah. But it's just the way they treat money and how, like, just disposable it is disgusting. And I think that's where Craig really, I love the performances. I think the performances are really, really good. But I think it's a story that just draws you in, because there's a story of struggle. There's a story of like entitlement. There's a story of rich versus the poor. It's a story of so many things that are happening. And here's this guy, Keith Gill, who's just like loves cats. He's an analyst. Like, he has like an analyst background, and he's like telling people, well, maybe you should invest your money into this, and let's drive this up, because this will lead to this, because this is really what these hedge fund managers do. They actually take that stock and they drop it so their funds can go up and whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not fucking
like, how are you betting against? Like, I don't. It's so stupid that you could like do that.
Yeah, it's crazy. But I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the movie. I enjoyed the performances. I thought it didn't feel like a Craig film. It felt very different. But I think he maybe wanted to take more of a serious approach, because there, the award season's coming down, and maybe he wants this to be more of an award type of film to be recognized. Because I can imagine, like I was just thinking of maybe if this was like the peak Craig Gillespie film, it would be like cats everywhere and it would be like very like colorful, smash in your face. I would say Pete Davidson would be more predominantly used in this type of environment, but no, this was it did feel like a McKay film where he's more of teaching us a lesson and teaching us history than throwing it in your face of something that happened in history. But I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, I had a great time with this movie, and I'm really excited for when it comes out, people to go watch it, because if you've been a fan of this story, and I feel like everybody knows something about this story, it feels like just that time period's like broken telephone of everyone was like, hey, did you hear about this? Did you go on Wall Street Bets? Did you do that? Everyone was talking about it in some way because it really felt like the most Robin Hood, no pun intended for the film, scenario of a movie. And I'm so glad it's finally out there. What about for you guys? Like, I mean, how are you guys feeling about it? What are some thoughts on the film? Not so much as recommendations, but just thoughts on the film.
Final thoughts, I guess. Like there's also some great needle drops in this movie.
Great needle drops.
Again, like hearing like
Craig's
WAP
always good at
and
that,
like,
though.
Yeah, Craig's always great of using music of the time, and it's like, oh, I still listen to all this music because it's recent music.
I still have it on my playlist.
So it's just, I still listen to all of this. WAP especially, most played song.
Absolutely.
But it's just it's just a great time. It's a great movie. I think it's so important, especially when you look at stories that are important today and will be important as the future goes on. Yes, it's a recent story. Yes, you may know about it, but there's so much more that you're going to get from Dumb Money that I don't think you would have gone by just, playing that game of broken telephone or even just, following some of the news. This really encompasses everything that was going on. And I really hope that we either get like a docuseries one day or a series that explores all of these stories and more, because there were so many other stocks being manipulated. There's so much more there. And even though this didn't have that traditional, Craig Gillespie energy that we're used to with maybe some of his other films, it's such a well-made film. There's so much to love in it, and the performances especially will keep you going throughout.
Absolutely. Anthony, what about yourself?
When I came back to remembering about the rights being sold, I think I said, like, why do we need to know this is happening right now? It's in our face. Like, we know, we see it, we live it. So having this story and actually understanding the people who are affected, the characters, and actually giving a face to just, oh, let's just put money into this stock, it really set the tone of what happened and why this was so important to the world and to like investing money and the stock market and what really actually happens in these big hedge fund firms. So it's one of those stories that I want to see more. I probably would love to see a docuseries or a TV series just to dive more into what transpired those months, that year, and how it got there. And who knows where it goes from there, because one thing that we do know is that no charges were laid, nothing happened, which is
what laws changed, right? Like,
exactly.
You wonder, like,
so,
what's the outcome of all of this?
Arbitrary laws.
Exactly. And we should use this as like some sort of stepping stone to getting better and becoming, better investors and utilizing our money and not being greedy like a lot of the world is in capitalism.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying we should
Let's go visit a GameStop, guys.
In solidarity.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, let's go get ripped off at a GameStop. Let's do that.
No.
No, what I love about this film also is that it has so many like Social Network, by David Fincher vibes to it. And I love that the book that this movie is based off of is called The Anti-Social Network. It's so smart. It's so clever. I love that. Of course, Dumb Money will be real. Before you
wrap up, you notice something at the end of this movie that I don't think a lot of people know about.
Oh, yes. The producers of this film. Isn't that insane? The Winklevoss twins are produced. I remember that they were producers.
Sorry, it's the Winklevi. The
Winklevi. That's right. Sorry, the Winklevoss twins. Like, it's crazy because I remember hearing that they after whatever happened, watch Social Network to find out more. They kind of pivoted into Hollywood and to producing, and then seeing their names kind of pop up at the end there, I was like, oh my god, that is so weird. It's such a it's so interesting. It's like there's an irony there. I don't know. It's just interesting.
It felt like almost like a joke.
It did.
Like, and again, it's nothing against them at all.
No,
because again, we've only seen them how they were portrayed in the Social Network, but to have as we know them in the Social Network, and B, these characters who are like, wait, but aren't you guys on the side of the hedge fund people? Like, don't you
Hold
come
on
from
a
that world?
second.
It's like it's just a funny juxtaposition to what this movie's actually about.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Of course, Dumb Money will be released by Elevation Pictures in Canada on September 22nd. So if you do go check it out, again, join our Discord. If you check it out at TIFF, if you check it out when it comes out in theaters, let us know, because we would love to hear from you what you thought about it. And also, if you invested in the GameStop stock, let us know. Are you still holding? Did you invest? And also, if you're super rich, give us some of that money, maybe. I don't know. I mean, don't you want to get some good quality
invest
episodes?
in the movie podcast. That's all I can say.
Invest in the movie
podcast. Exactly. I don't know. My dog was right here behind me, and I was like, give some to my dog, but I don't know where he is now. So, hey,
dude, I saw him disappear. It was like Star Trek.
He literally disappeared. It was. Yeah, exactly like that.
I think he heard us talking about
he went to go invest
in our other review.
Oh yes,
and he's like, "Oh, you guys were talking about Messi. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go. You don't need me here. Clearly,
I'm gonna practice my lines."
But I'm on strike, so I can't.
But I'm on strike. Dogtra.
Of course, this was the Movie Podcast. Make sure to follow us on all social media platforms that are out there in the world. You can check out our show notes for everything down below. That was This Time with the Movie Podcast, and we'll see you next.